positivity, motivation, never settle for average. I want to ask you guys out there a question and get your opinion. I was just thinking about something and reflecting on vibrations, frequencies, and spirituality, and thinking about music. And I wanted to ask you guys out there if you think that gangster rap is dark magic or black magic or underlined with the frequency of Satan. And when I say Satan, you know, Satan has his own dominion. He enlists soldiers to do his dirty work, to spread low vibrations, low frequency activity, destruction, death, things that are counterproductive to harmony, growth, and family values. And when I think about hip hop in general, or this classic R&B, Luther Vandross, Freddie Jackson, Whispers, Temptations, Teddy Pendergrass, Brothers Johnson, Frankie Beverly and the Maze, Isley Brothers, Al Green, Lou Rawls, Aretha Franklin, Betty Wright. I mean, all these artists and how they sang with such emotion and talked about family and relationships and trying to get back together, and how, you know, times were tough, but you know, you had to work to take care of each other and raising the kids, and you know, how the men used to sing about, you know, trying to get the woman back, and you know, the relationship and love. And it was just a really strong vibe with the music when I listened to that old school music. I grew up on that, you know, driving in the car with my grandparents, you know, listening to my mom play the Commodores and just all the classics, you know, back then, Earth, Wind and Fire, Lakeside. And you know, as I'm mature in myself and I listen to that music now, I'm like, wow, you know, it's crazy how much it's shifted, and how a lot of these black artists have been used to push in a narrative that's so self-destructive, so immoral, and just ratchet. And you know, once the black culture gets a hold of something, it's hard for them to let it go. So they, by design, knew that if black culture got a hold of something, they were going to take it all the way to the end. And if you think back to like the 60s and 70s and how they try to use rock and roll, and you know, they used to always say rock and roll was Satan's music, right? And if you play the record backwards, they would say things that were, you know, pretty satanic. I forgot the name, but one of the artists, he said he sold his soul. I can't remember off the top of my head. It maybe come to me by the end of this video, but he said he sold his soul. They said a lot of these rock bands would make deals with the devil. I don't know if you guys recall, like the old AC/DC, Ozzy Osbourne, some of the other just really heavy metal bands, Metallica. A lot of things were centered around the devil and very dark worship of, you know, satanic spirits. And you know, they sung a lot of stuff, did a lot of crazy things, and it was the vibe of that music. And if you look at what happened, that vibe of that music kind of died out, but then it took on a new form in hip hop. And you started having rappers talk about the devil, 3 6 Mafia, some of these other rap groups that started adopting satanic signs and symbols and pushing a very dark narrative. And then all the death that followed, your ops killing this guy, F your mom, and just using very derogatory terms in reference to each other. I don't recall any of that going on in the 60s or 70s music, as far as how other artists referred to each other, or how we referred to ourselves in our culture, our women in our culture. It just all shifted. And when I look at MK Ultra, right, and I think about Charlie Manson and how he was able to use LSD to manipulate these women to commit these murders and follow him, and just whatever he said, they were almost in a trance and they were programmed to do whatever he told them. And then you think about gangster rap, these kids riding around with Dracos, ghost guns, ready to kill, smoking weed, doing Percocets, getting high, and just the whole programming, the beat, how they changed that whole rhythm to where that beat, it almost puts you in a trance. And then when you snap out of that with the drugs, you don't know that you had just did a drive-by, maybe kill somebody's child, because you're recklessly shooting at these houses or at these people. And so when I say Satan's work or black magic, this hip hop, the gangster hip hop, because they've tried to destroy hip hop, you have some guys still holding it down that are still putting out positive rap, but they don't get a lot of play. And so the ones you see with the grills, with the gold chains, with the, the air guns, and, they're bragging about shooting somebody or getting shot at, glorifying it. You think about, like, what is possessing people to talk about that, and why did we get so far away from talking about the positive stuff, the things that the Brand Nubians or the X-Clan or Jungle Brothers or Big Daddy Kane, Bismarck, just some of the Rakim, Nas still kicks a lot of game. He doesn't talk about death in all his music or killing. He tells a good story and brings a lot of sense. But when you just think about it, do you not see that this is a spiritual vibe on the music? Like, almost like they put some type of, I don't know if you want to call it a spell on it, but the young people that listen to it go into a trance. I remember being in the Boys Ranch when NWA came out and how riled up everybody was. And this was the height of, the gangbang era. Everybody was a gangbanger, and fighting it and doing all this stuff was very popular. And it was just a shift from lyrical word manipulation to talking about killing somebody, murdering somebody, taking somebody out. And I just look at, like, when you sit back and think about the industry and those who believe in a certain type of worship, and if they wanted to serve their God, what would be the best way for them to serve their God and to sacrifice millions of people in that God's honor? Why not do it through gangster rap? Why not use gangster rap as a psyop and twist that into a way where you're paying these people, but in the process of paying them, they're destroying themselves. They're on the outside appearing to get the benefits of the monetary, but spiritually, they're being wiped out. Generations, because as it persists, each generation gets more and more violent, and it's not it hasn't reached a tipping point yet to where it flipped, to where you have somebody talking about family, loving thy child, and you know, it's just right now it's just on a whirlwind. You know, listen to some old classic. You know, I don't even like to use the word classic, but listen to some old, you know, Melvin and the Blue Notes, or some Al Green, or some Teddy, or some Marvin Gaye, or some Stevie Wonder. Just listen to some of the old music and just think about what they were going through at the times. You know, young men coming back from Vietnam, frustrated, you know, being used up in a war to basically move drugs. You know, I mean, they were all suckered into the Vietnam War. You know, you were dealing with, at that time, before the 60s, it was a height of the strength of the black family. A lot of black families were together. You had probably a close to a 90% family, mother and father in the household. And what do you have now? You have probably, you know, barely, I don't know, maybe less than 50. I have to look at the numbers, but mother and father in the household. You know, how many single mothers do we have right now in the black community? You know, it's very interesting when you just think about drugs, manipulation, then, you know, involvement of the government with the music. You know, the CIA, I remember the Bone Thugs and Harmony. I forgot which one talked about going to, you know, a hip hop meeting and how all the executives came together and they decided to like kind of push a certain narrative of rap, because that rap had the ability to create almost like a psychological behavior which would benefit privatized prisons.
And destroyed a generation.
Damn.
So it says, hello. After more than 20 years, I finally decided to tell the world what I witnessed in 1991, which I believe was one of the biggest turning points in popular music and ultimately American society. I have struggled for a long time weighing the pros and cons of making my story public, as I was reluctant to implicate the individuals who were present that day. So I've simply decided to leave out the names and all the details that may risk my personal well-being and that of those who were, like me, dragged into something they weren't ready for.
Damn.
Hold on, let me
So we gonna tell the story.
We gonna tell the story. We ain't scared.
You know what I'm saying? What they gonna do?
They after us, not just playing.
Look, that black van.
So look, so he says, between the late 80s and early 90s, I was what you may call a decision maker with one of the more established companies in the music industry. I came to Europe in the early 80s and quickly established myself in the business. The industry was different back then, since technology and media weren't accessible to people like that, like they are today. The industry had more control over the public and had the means to influence them any way it wanted.
Right.
This may explain why in early 1991, I was invited to attend a closed-door meeting with a small group of business insiders to discuss rap music's new direction. Rap music's new direction.
Yeah.
Little did I know we would be asked to participate in one of the most unethical and destructive business practices ever seen.
Crazy.
So this was the meeting. The meeting was held at a private residence on the outskirts of Los Angeles. I remember about 25 to 30 people were being there.
Right.
Most of them familiar faces. Speaking of those I knew, we joked about the theme of the meeting, as many of us did not care for rap and failed to see the purpose of being invited to a private meeting to discuss the future of hip-hop.
Talk to him.
Among the attendees was a small group of unfamiliar faces who stayed to themselves and made no attempt to socialize beyond their circle. Based on their behavior and formal appearances, they didn't seem to be from our industry. Our casual chatter was interrupted when we were asked to sign the confidentiality agreement, preventing us from publicly discussing the information presented during the meeting. Needless to say, this intrigued, in some cases, disturbed many of us. The agreement was only a page long, but very clear on matters and consequences, which stated that violating the terms would result in job termination immediately. We asked several people what this meeting was about and the reason for such secrecy, but could not find anyone who had the answers for us. A few people refused to sign and walked out. Nobody stopped them. I was tempted to follow, but curiosity got the best of me.
That's right.
A man who was part of the unfamiliar group collected all the agreements from us. So now it's going to get to the good part because the meeting about to start.
Talk to him, G.
It says, quickly after the meeting began, hold on one second.
Get your popcorn, y'all.
Popcorn, get your pistol. No,
For real, though.
Quickly after this meeting began, one of the industry colleagues, who shall remain nameless like everybody else, thanked us for attending. He then gave the floor to a man who only introduced himself by first name and gave no other details about his personal background. I think he was the owner of the residence, but that was never confirmed. He briefly praised all of us for the success we had achieved in our industries and congratulated us for being selected as part of this small group of decision makers. At this point, I began to feel slightly uncomfortable and the strangeness of this gathering. The subject quickly changed as the speaker went on to tell us that the respective companies we represented had invested in a very profitable industry, which could become even more rewarding with our active involvement.
Damn.
He explained that the companies we worked for had invested millions into the building of privately owned prisons, and that our positions of influence in the music industry would actually impact the profitability of these investments. Then he says, I remember many of us in the group immediately looking at each other in awe and confusion. At the same time, I didn't know what a private prison was, but I wasn't the only one. Sure enough, someone asked what these prisons were and what any of this had to do with music. We were told that these prisons were built by privately owned companies who receive funding from the government based on the number of inmates. The more inmates, the more the government would pay these prisons. It was also made clear to us that since these prisons are privately owned, as they become publicly traded, we'd be able to buy shares. Most of us were taken back by this. Again, a couple of people asked what this had to do with us. At this point, my industry colleague who had first opened the meeting took the floor again and answered our questions. He told us that since our employees had become silent investors in this prison business, it was now in their interest to make sure that these prisons remain filled. Our job would be to help make this happen by making music which promote criminal behavior, rap being the music of choice. He assured us that this would be a great situation for us because rap music was becoming an increasingly profitable market for our companies, and as employees, we'd also be able to buy stocks in these prisons. Immediately, silence came over the room. You could have heard a pin drop. I remember looking around to make sure I wasn't dreaming and saw half of the people with dropped jaws. My daze was interrupted when someone shouted, "Is this a fucking joke?" At this point, things became chaotic.
Right.
Two of the men who were part of the unfamiliar group grabbed the man who shouted and attempted to remove him from the house. A few of us, myself included, tried to intervene. One of them pulled out a gun, and we all backed off. They separated us from the crowd, and all four of us was escorted outside. My industry colleague who opened up the meeting earlier hurried out to meet us and reminded us that we had signed an agreement and would suffer the consequences of speaking out about this publicly, or even those who attended the meeting.
Damn.
I asked him, why was he involved with something so corrupt? And he replied, it's bigger than the music business and nothing we can do And, no, it's bigger than the music business, and nothing we want to challenge without risking consequences. We all protested as we walked back into the house. I remember word for word the last thing he said. It's out of my hands now. Just remember, you signed an agreement. He then closed the door behind him. The men rushed us to our car and actually waited until we drove off the property.
Damn.
So,
you know, think about it. If guys weren't thinking about killing and robbing and drugs and all this stuff, and they were actually, you know, doing trades and building businesses and all this stuff, you know, the prisons, they wouldn't make no money. And either, you know, prisons are for profit. These prisons, they're getting government contracts. They have to fill those beds up. And I always say that prisons are the only business that can't advertise. But once you commit a crime, you go to prison. Now you're up in there, you're working for them, doing the same shit you should have been doing before you committed the crime. But when you get in prison, you start seeing, you think about like what made you commit the crime. A lot of people don't really think about it, but you know, it's a combination of your vibe, your the music, the drugs, you know, what type of mind state you're in. And then you get to prison, and after a while, you done snapped out of that trance and you realize you've been duped. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. I'm probably one of the few people on the internet that talk about being duped. You know, guys, they do all these podcasts and they still talking about all this gang stuff. And they've done 20, 30 years. They wasted their lives. Dudes brag about, I got shot 6 times. Dude, would you rather have got shot 6 times or traveled, you know, the world and raised some kids and had a family and did? I mean, we glorify bullshit. Yeah, I talk about some of the stuff on my channel, but not in a glorification. It ain't nothing to brag about. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, some of the stuff that we take pride in thinking like it made us somebody, like it was a badge of honor or a rite of passage. That's how you know some MK Ultra shit going on, because people are actually thinking that this is something that makes us black or gives us culture. The gangs are gangs. Gangs are not black culture. And this whole, like I said, this children of Satan, this low frequency dark vibration, this black magic. They used rock back in the day, and they used, you know, they had the whole hippie movement, the whole Deadheads and the Doors, and they were using. They tried it with them first, and they seen how it worked. Peep game, man. Go read about the Doors and see how all that shit played out. That guy's dad was tied in with the CIA. There's a lot of the whole Laurel Canyon, Mulholland stuff. You read about it. There's a lot of information out there. I'm actually about to get a book called Chaos, and it talks about Charles Manson and how he was tied in with the government and experimenting with LSD and all this stuff. All this stuff was very manipulative in its mind control. So when they tried it with the rock crowd and had all these rock and roll, predominantly, you know, young white people, you know, out of their mind, doing stuff and involved in all this just mental manipulation, they like, wow, man, if we could tie that into this other industry, which has gotten so much momentum because rock and roll died out and they didn't know that hip hop was going to last this long. They got rid of R&B. They divided hip hop, made a gangster rap, gave these guys a whole image, gave these guys what they thought was a purpose of killing each other. But they talk about racism, but they kill each other more than anybody else in their songs. Murder, murder, murder. Oh, we need to come together. But don't none of them call each other out on the murdering of each other and the beefs over really nothing. Nothing. Think about the MK Ultra implications of gangster music, the musical vibration, the drug combination, the lack of resources in these areas where this music is coming from, lack of trade skills, lack of education. So you take all those things and you put, so you know there's an ingredient mixture to all this. You take all those ingredients, put them together, and what do you have? You have a satanic movement in the black gangster rap culture that spreads across the world, because you got young people in Africa, Poland, over in South Africa, in South America, everywhere, wanting to be black gangster rappers, killing each other. Isn't that crazy, man? Is it not black magic, dark magic, or satanic overtones to this shit, man? Or am I just way out? Call it a conspiracy if you want, but read about Manson and read about how they use LSD to manipulate all those people into committing those horrendous murders, and think about the murders that have been committed in the gangster rap game and how many people have been killed over something that has just is all about mind control and perception, and how they keep that going. They have these agent provocateurs who's always, think about it, it's always beefs. Create this beef, talk about this, and then it escalates, and then the sales. Is this not a psyop? Or am I just tripping? BigHerc916, subscribe to the channel, represent, pick you up some merch at BigHerc.com to pick up a limited edition GTA poster signed by me for $10, or with your purchase of a Wig Splitter Porsche t-shirt, I'll throw in a free poster signed.
Officially, I only got one real spanking my entire life. My mom did the best a 14-year-old could do, raising me with love and instilling values that will last a lifetime. I was a straight-A student and lived to make her happy. So how did I go astray? A horrible stepdad that stole my self-worth and invoked fear turned me into a person that I struggled to overcome. From skateboarding to selling drugs, gangbanging in juvenile hall, I got caught the same way many young promising men get caught up. I struggled to find my identity, getting mixed up in shootouts, crime, and the adult entertainment industry. This roller coaster continued as I juggled college, hustling, and Hollywood, eventually catching a federal bank robbery case. I found redemption in prison while serving a 120-month federal sentence and came out a man on a mission. I became a social media influencer with over 500 million views on YouTube and a life coach mentoring people all over the world. This is my journey.
Are you tired of smelling funky? Have you washed your ass? Go to BigHerc916.com and get to Nutsack Run.